Thank you so much for joining us on the UK's biggest screen. I mean, what an experience, guys. Audience, how was that for you? Pretty full on, right? They're still recovering. I mean, this is a really extraordinary film in so many ways, and I can say confidently as a film critic, I've never seen anything quite like it. And congratulations to you both, because I mean that in the best way possible. That it surprised me at every turn, it moved me, it made me laugh, it made me think. So thank you.
Thank you.
Where do we start? I mean, obviously, just to point out, I presume people know that Nathan is also in the film, but with a lot of prosthetics.
Right.
So, but you co-directed this, and David wrote it. David, where did it start?
Well, we've always been since we were kids, we were obsessed with Bigfoot lore. It's kind of the America is too young to have a lot of mythology, and so we'll take what we can get with Bigfoot, and we've been obsessed with cryptids in general, but yeah, particularly Bigfoot, and then I think as adults, our interest in it kind of stemmed from the way it kind of represents our connection to the natural world, and sort of this kind of gray area between human and animal behavior.
And when did you first have a discussion together about making this? Because there was a short film first, wasn't there, Nathan? Is that right?
Yeah, we've actually done a few other things where there was a Bigfoot character, but the first thing we did where Bigfoot was front and center was this short film in 2011 called Sasquatch Birth Journal 2, and it was a 4-minute short, and for 3.5 minutes, there's a Sasquatch up in the tree delivering a baby. And I played the Sasquatch in that one. And it kind of stemmed from a lot of the footage that you see of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. There's the famous, it's called the Patterson-Gimlin film. It's where the silhouette comes. It's the, iconic walking across the meadow and the Bigfoot looks over its shoulder. And then you see a lot of stuff even now on YouTube of people posting Bigfoot encounters, but it's walking or hiding or just kind of walking, a lot of walking. And so we would just joke, well, if it's a real animal, what else is it doing? Why is the only footage of Bigfoot just kind of lumbering around? And so that was just we just kept coming up with ideas of what Bigfoot is doing when no one else is there.
Yeah. Basically the same thing any other wild animal would be doing in the wilderness.
Yeah.
So we wanted to cover the full spectrum of its existence, basically.
So is there an element of us sort of being inspired by the nature documentary, the kind of unseen camera kind of idea?
Yeah, and the way some of those are structured, where it's we wanted to have it structured as much in this kind of naturalistic way as possible. So there was, or from the from the creature's point of view. Yeah. So we didn't want to have any humans in it that we're kind of filtering the story through. It's also why we didn't want to have narration with it. Anything that kind of in placing a certain level of. We wanted all the judgment to be from the filmmakers, not from some humans in between, and it just seemed like the most interesting way to do it. And then also framing the story with the 4 seasons, just like a natural kind of framework with it, and structuring around life and death and highbrow, lowbrow, everything in between that exists in the Sasquatch world.
Yeah, it really does span all those things. As you say, there's a lot of comedy at the start and then a lot of pathos. I mean, do you guys, as your brothers, so do you have a kind of understanding of tone that you don't even need to discuss it, or is it something that you kind of debate about?
Yeah, I think our tone is just kind of, we've grown up watching a lot of the same things. We've actually really influenced by a lot of British comedy. Yay. And British films and stuff like that.
For example? For the British crowd, come on.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like when we were kids, like Monty Python, obviously, and then I don't know, a lot of like Nighty Night. Love.
Oh, I love Nighty Night.
I don't know,
Great
just,
show.
but a whole bunch. I don't know, countless things, but yeah, and I think we always knew there was going to be some absurdity to this. Just because you're dealing with the kind of, animals with human-like qualities that are doing very animalistic things, and so that is inherently absurd, and it's sort of behavior that, if you saw your dog or cat do, you wouldn't place much judgment on. But then when it's this, the human-like creature, it suddenly becomes a lot more awkward when they're doing these things. So, but then at the same time, it was more interesting to see if we could dig deeper in the way that that humans are connected to the natural world, and hope ideally make people care about these creatures and be open to the just the highs and lows of their existence as it goes on.
Massively. I was emotionally invested. I mean, I know a lot of people have been. And Nathan, I mean, a lot of that's down to the performances of actors like yourself. I'd like to talk to you about how you worked with your co-stars to kind of, with all the prosthetics, to develop that sort of bond, but also tension that you have as a group.
Yeah, technically, it was, we all got, head to toe casts of our face and our bodies, and these suits were, extremely tight foam covered in fur and heavy, and 2 hours in the makeup chair putting on, the face and the hair and making it all look as realistic as possible. But it was amazing. Once we all kind of got the suits on, you really kind of felt, empowered, like you felt like a beast. And I think that's just kind of the magic of a good costume. But our rehearsal was mostly just kind of getting us very comfortable with acting like animals and kind of comfortable with the things that we needed to do to make us look like a species. Because there's, like I said, there's some baseline for Bigfoot, and then we took a lot of influenced, or references from primate videos and watching how orangutans or gorillas move and grab things and eat things, and how they interact with each other. And so like the goal for like our rehearsal wasn't like talking through emotional beats as much as it was, making sure we were all looking like a realistic family of Bigfoot. And then when we were on set and doing the movie, it was less of, we spent no time like talking through like, no, a Bigfoot would move like this. It was all like real, filmmaking and directing of like, this is what you're feeling here, and this is what,
It was uniform at that point.
Yeah, there was a uniform at that point. And so it became, it was funny, like, the costumes are anatomically correct and really outrageous. And most of the time I'm co-directing with David and in makeup, so like I'm standing with him behind the camera holding a monitor and have this face on. And like the first day, and the crew knew from the start what we were doing, and they were very down, but it's kind of shocking to see all this, and like, wait, what are we making here? And it got normalized so quickly.
By day two, no one thought anything of it. It was
anytime anyone would come to visit the set, they'd be like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? And then you remember like it's kind of
this was weird at one point. Yeah. It's not anymore. Yeah.
It became normalized almost. Yeah. I'd love you to tell me one story about Riley Keough and one story about Jesse Eisenberg. You can choose which one, but I mean, they're both tremendous in this. So.
Well, let's see. I mean, to start with Jesse, in that he really helped get the film off the ground. This took a long time to get going, and he's been a friend of ours for a long time, but he'd never been in one of our films. We just like share scripts with each other and that sort of thing. But I was, then when we thought of him for this, I was almost, even though we're good friends, I still felt like almost ashamed sending it to him because you have to have an absolute lack of vanity, to do this role, and I just, and I didn't want to insult him, but he completely, he got it and loved it, and he's really adventurous and daring in the kind of roles he seeks out, and is looking for different kinds of challenges, and so he saw what a unique experience it would be, and the challenge, particularly that, especially for someone that is so verbose, to play a character that you're conveying. It's almost like silent film acting in some ways, because you're conveying so much of the performance with the physicality and the subtlest of facial expressions, without and not even the benefit of dialogue for any kind of exposition. So he was up for it. And then he also was on board as a producer and really got the financing together. And we couldn't have done it without him. And then Riley, we got a little closer to the production, but as another situation where she got it right away, and she hasn't done as much comedy, but she is so funny and has such great natural comedic timing. But then there's a real very much a soulful quality to her, especially in her eyes. And we were so excited. She has these just these big blue eyes, and they're just so expressive and can just convey so much about what was going on in the interior world of the Sasquatch. And and the script was very descriptive because we didn't want everyone from the financiers to the crew, but especially the cast, we didn't want any surprises. It was like, this is exactly what is happening in the film. And so they were all down for it. I just remember the two things she said regarding the script, where she said, well, if it's okay, I want to be the most feral of the bunch. Okay. And then she said, if I'm doing this, you better not cut the road scene. We're like, okay, we're not cutting it, I promise.
I mean, what a scene that is, right? Do you want to talk to me more about your decisions in that scene?
Well, we're trying to think about what, like the first time they are really interacting with human civilization. I mean, they see the X in the tree kind of building up to it, but then we just thought nothing could be more invasive to them than their entire lives. They live on this like seamless landscape of forest land, and then suddenly there's this like searing gash through the landscape that stretches off into an infinity either direction. And so they kind of go through a whole process of fear and confusion, and then rage, and then dominance of the road by the end. And it seemed both like poignant and absurd in equal measure, and obviously a little inspired, or maybe more than a little inspired, by the Donna Mann sequence in 2001. Oh yeah. But they're not enlightened when they get through this process. And then I think and then it just seemed, growing up, we were influenced by a lot of primate videos and everything Nathan said, but we genuinely so much of the stuff in this film came from just things we've seen our pets do as kids, dogs and cats, and a big part of that is marking their territory. And so it just seemed like if they were just so had to experience this emotional overload with complete rage, that it was like that was the best they could do,
I'm sure a lot of people
to take control of the situation.
Yeah, relate to that. A pet doing what they shouldn't, when they're angry. Yeah. And that's actually something I enjoyed about this film, because that's another reason you relate to it. You're thinking of your animals and your pets. Before I cut to the audience, I wanted to ask you both about the music, because I know that Riley sings in this, and the music itself is absolutely gorgeous. So talk to me about the thinking behind it.
Yeah. The composers are this band from Austin, Texas, where we originated from. They're called the Octopus Project, and we've known them for, I guess, 20 years. And this is our 4th or 5th collaboration with them. And it was just we had them come in early and kind of talk about different influences. We wanted this ethereal kind of like score that felt like otherworldly but also familiar, and they got involved. They actually came and visited us while we were filming, and took microphones and started knocking on trees and in the ground.
Sampled a lot of
things, yeah. And so like they're hidden in the soundtrack. There's a lot of like sounds from the forest that are in there, which is kind of cool. And then
and the musical references we gave them were, I mean, I don't know, we wanted this kind of dreamy psychedelic feel to this score at points, and so it's like this group Popolva from a lot of like 1970s Herzog films were scored by them, and then this album by Miles Davis called Bitches Brew that has a kind of psychedelic feel to it as well. So that was really the references we gave them, something in between that.
Yeah, I get that. That works for me, kind of a folky vibe as well. I loved it.
Yes, especially with the song with Riley.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Riley, yeah. And there's something perverse to us about having Riley not talk the whole movie, and then she sings over the end credits. Yeah. Well, regarding the actor Christoph Zajac-Denik, he had been in the least amount of things of any of the actors, but we had seen him in he was in Twin Peaks: The Return, season 3. He was this character called Ike the Spike. And he was we thought he was really interesting in that, and and he was all in, and he has a great physicality about him, and just like the others, it was crucial that they get the tone and that we were going for, and and so he definitely he totally got that, and did as great a job as anyone else. So yeah, we had a great time with him. Nathan, you want to talk about the makeup?
Yes, we my character is kind of designed as more of a stereotypical what people are familiar with when they think of a Sasquatch. And then for the other three, the designs were, like Jesse's character, he describes his character as like the poet of the group, so he's a little bit softer, his description, which we loved. And then, of course, Riley has a little bit more of a feminine and soulful quality, and then the child would be like the younger version. And we didn't do like a lot of like the face molds were the same each day. It was just however we painted them on the day. Like when my character goes off the deep end and starts using and abusing all the powers of the forest. There was like a lot of like just making me look as shitty as possible. And then, yeah, but I think you had a different face mask every day that we would, you'd glue it on and then you'd throw it away, and all sorts of fun challenges with that. So.
Well, and you say it was in different pieces, but we wanted it was a combination of making it the way it was designed by the creature designer Steve Newburn. It was just to have it. Thick enough to function as a creature, but then thin enough to be able to emote through it. So it's kind of broken up into some different pieces from that. Since there's not like a easy comp for this in describing it initially, we more than we normally would, had to have a very very detailed, specific script mapping out what we're, just to make it clear what we were trying to accomplish, and especially with the tone, because initially when talking to financiers, they would assume, like most the Bigfoot movies that fall into like the horror category, or some would be like a children's film or something, and we were trying to make clear we were doing neither of those things, and explaining why it was from their point of view and everything. So because there's no dialogue in it, it's shorter than a regular script. It's about it's like 60 pages, which is what a normal script would be if you yanked out every line of dialogue in it. And but it was very detailed with the beats and just the exposition, and trying as much as we could to explain the interior lives of these creatures. And yeah, it was structured with the seasons. We needed some kind of framework, and so that seemed like the best way to do it. There's very because of you have such limited time, it takes so long to get in the creature costume. There's so much preparation, and there's not a lot of improv, and we were just hitting. There's very specific things they needed to do. That said, in the rehearsal, from the rehearsal period with everyone through through production, there's we come in very prepared, everything kind of mapped out, but then with the ability to adapt if things necessitate change that are either out of necessity or because there's something that's much better than what we had on the page. So, some weather would force that. Sometimes the location not being quite what we or finding a location much cooler than what we imagined, but we just had to kind of change something with the setup, and then. Or just when the actor's actually doing it, they elevated it in a way that was much more interesting than what we initially intended. What was that? Oh, and the animals too. We with the animals, we've worked with a lot of animals before, and so we cast to their strengths and kind of adapt ourselves around them, and started instead of trying to make them do something that we want them to. And so it was like. Set them up to succeed, because if you can let an animal in this certain within these certain boundaries do whatever it wants, it's going to have the most natural, incredible performance. And so we cast the animals that way. For example, like the porcupine was just going to be a porcupine, but then the trainer said that it likes to wave, and we're like, oh. Okay, well, we'll do a little rewrite. You cannot turn down the opportunity to incorporate a waving porcupine when it wants to wave. You got to read the room. So we did things like that, that when it was appropriate. Well, it was just an intuitive thing because you only have so much you can go from with the lore, you know. So yeah, the tree knocking, the building of the nests, the making of the little glyphs at the graves, and burying the dead, things like that we heard about from the lore. We use that as kind of a foundation and adapted them accordingly. I guess an example of that, like there's lots of videos on YouTube of people in the woods, hearing things in the distance, knocking and saying, "Oh, that's Bigfoot communicating." But it was, and we kind of took that, for instance, and there's something interesting about the knocking was interesting, but also this kind of like desire to reach out and connect with others and getting nothing in return, this kind of longing. So it was almost like the space that they're waiting after they knocked was as interesting to us as the knocking itself. And then, I don't know, it was just intuitive. We cherry picked from primate behavior, some human behavior, and then other animal behavior, and just tried to find a mix that felt like the right balance for what we needed.
I wish I could remember the skunk's name, but we in the script it was a rabbit, and then our producer was like talking about how it would be funny if it was a skunk and he was huffing the skunk, because it's kind of like,
Well, first he said huffing or a skunk, and then we added.
oh, huffing, yeah. He's like, what if it was a skunk, because it looks like it's supposed to be dangerous, like you're saying, like, oh no, a skunk. And so we were calling around, and we found this rescue zoo, and she had a skunk, and it was supposedly scented or whatever.
The people that had it.
Yeah, the people had it, because it was like this rescue zoo for people who had tried to domesticate wild animals, which never works. And so then this zoo is like, no, we'll take care of them because we can't put them back in the wild. And she was the lady who then had the porcupine and the badger and a whole bunch of, like, we just she was amazing. And the skunk was actually pretty, I mean, it kind of had like a little smell, but it was actually very sweet. And most of these animals, they don't really care. It was, I think, a compliment on the makeup work is they just kind of looked at us like other animals and were really like, whatever. Just a shrug and, onto eating whatever I want to eat. And but the mountain lions, because you can't really train or domesticate a mountain lion at all. And we just didn't know how they would react because, they could have seen it as a threat. So that was the only time that we really kind of that we took more precautions. Like they all the stuff with the mountain lions, like split screen and kind of carefully mapped out. And again, the mountain lion, all it really wants to do, there was two. The one that's eating me, it was an older one. I think it's like 16 years old, and all it wants to do is eat chicken breast. So we had a dummy of me and just put a bunch of chicken breast in my stomach and filmed the magic. And his reactions are, us trying to get him to look up, and he looks up and he's like, well, whatever, And then the second one was the one that's at the birthing scene. That one was a much younger one, and they had kind of like got it used to the placenta prop of kind of playing with it, but it just wanted to play, it wanted to climb up trees and all this fun stuff. And that was, it was,
Treated like a cat toy.
Yeah, treated like a cat toy. I think they threw down some little chicken niblets to get it to stand up on the log, but that was actually a scene David wrote, and it was one of those amazing things where he, I'm talking for him, but he had a vision in his head of what it was going to look like, this big cat holding a placenta, watching them kind of scurry away, and it just turned out exactly like it was on the page, which is very rare with animals. So. I think that's it's hard to say because I think it definitely, the feeling is sort of like this longing to find other ones of their kind, and as winter kind of approaches, the food starts getting more scarce, and the burden of keeping things together is all on her shoulders. And I think I think that's where the pathos comes for us, is it just felt such like a sad situation to be alone and having to care for two young children, and still kind of like, like fight for survival and survive in nature. I think that's she definitely, and Riley in that regard really just elevated like the emotional weight. It was just her performance in there. I think she really kind of takes over the film at that point of like the emotional core of it. And you can kind of track it in the beginning a little bit, but it's definitely like the direction from the beginning that we're going to.
That said, we can only speculate what goes on in the mind of the Sasquatch. We'll never truly know. The complete lack of shame was the main one, because that's the key thing that I feel like separates humans from the rest of the world, animal world. And that's also why we wanted to be open to, like, without judgment in ways that we would never do if it was a movie about humans, to the whole spectrum of their behavior, because to them and any other animal, the marking their territory or whatever. Sex, public sex, anything. It's all the same kind of behavior, and so it's no different than foraging or anything else. So we just kind of wanted to normalize it all, and not push it, not obsess over it, but also just but not avoid having it. In the same way, we wanted to be open to the darker aspects with death and loss and yearning and all that. So we. And we knew in the beginning it was going to be a little more on the absurdist side, and then as you approach them, as almost like a herd, and then the more you dive in, they have the individualistic, qualities becoming distinctive, and their plight becomes more clear.
With the sex scenes, can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like actually filming this? Because were there any stunt people involved? Were there intimacy coordinators, for example?
No, it was very clear on the page, and then the three of us, Riley and Nathan, I got together and talked about it. But I mean, they're wearing like several inches of padding. The only thing exposed are their eyeballs. So it was absurd and funny.
It's pretty comedic
to do. Yeah. Well, yeah, we had a trash can as a stand-in for them, framing it up. But other than that, we had to have something. We didn't have a double. So, yeah. But yeah, it was. I mean, although we did it on like day 2, and that was, which was so. And the only other thing I'll say about it is like half the movie was shot on private land where we had more privacy with what we were doing, and we could just kind of do whatever. And those scenes are the ones we would do with you. That's where you could have, where you could bring the animals and everything, but then a lot of it was on this kind of very regulated parkland that they're very protective of, because they have these 1,000-year-old trees, and so they're very specific where you can and can't go, and that you can't bring any outside animals in, and that sort of thing. And so on those days, you had a park ranger that was right by your side the whole time, and it was usually like a 22-year-old ranger that was basically just given the gig that morning and had no context of what's going on. And so I just remember that me and Riley and Nathan were planning the scene out and setting it up, and then just right next to it was this stone-faced ranger. I thought he'd laugh or he'd be offended. He was neither. It's just kind of nonplussed, just standing there, just staring. It's just another thing in the woods. So.
I just quickly wanted to finish up by asking, a lot of people do test screenings with humans, but is it true that you actually showed the films to bonobo monkeys?
This is true.
Amazing.
It started as a joke, and then it became a wonderful dream come true. We were just like, well, what would it be like if we showed this film to primates? And so, I don't know, just kind of testing the waters, we reached out to these primatologists that run a bonobo refuge in America, and just waiting for an immediate no. And then they were a little curious about what we were doing. Then we talked to them, and they were a little more curious, and we explained our intentions and what what the inspirations were of the film, including a lot of primate videos and everything. And so they agreed to watch it, and then they really liked it, and they this is absurd and weird, but you guys did your homework with some of the primate behavior, and they said, for what it's worth, every weird thing you see the Sasquatches do in this movie, we see the bonobos do here every day, and it's just completely normalized.
Yeah.
So they invited us to come to their facility and show the bonobos the movie. I mean, it's not the first. They've seen other movies, so they have access.
They have like a nice screening room.
They have
Is it all
access to
swishy?
Netflix, and they know how to they know how to use a touch screen, and they
God.
scroll on the touch screen the way like a very bored like 11-year-old would. It's just like just scrolling, and with a main bonobo, this one named Kanzi, his favorite movie is Hook. For some reason, he just loves watching
Right.
Hook. But and he also likes the Minions movies.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah.
And we showed them. Yeah, we showed them a Sasquatch Sunset, and they were engaged. And the main thing I mean they were glued to the screen, but the main response we got from them that was specific was whenever Nathan's character was on screen, they'd give the screen a tap. And like in a sense that they didn't like him, and so in an act of
Congrats.
dominance, they'd thump the screen whenever he came on, and they said it was less out of anger and more out of like they recognized him as the alpha, and they were going to assert their dominance over him. So it was very gratifying sharing that.
That is so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so the film's out this Friday, 14th of June in the UK. So if you know any humans that might want to see it, or bonobos, then please tell them about it. Listen, David and Nathan, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you both. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, BFI
Appreciate it.
IMAX. Thank you.